Hey, this is Dominic, and this is your home for the cutting-edge conversations on optimizing your personal performance, lighting up your sex life, and living a purpose-driven life of your own design.
These are the topics that Dominic and I have both struggled with in our own lives and still don't always get right. This is Brian. Welcome to the Great Man Podcast.
Some of the best conversations on this podcast are when we dig into the everyday realities of masculinity and contemplate what it means to be a man in this ever-changing world. Now, one of the men whose work around masculinity that I've come to respect is Ryan King. Ryan has a fairly new and excellent Instagram account where he's taken really a unique approach to creating substantive, thought-provoking, and beautifully designed long-form posts on masculinity. To give you a flavor for some of the titles of his posts, "The boy must die for the man to emerge." "She wants a partner, not a project." "I would die for her, but do I truly live every day for her?" Which is a post we're actually going to talk about on the show today. I wanted to bring him on this podcast to have a deeper dialogue around masculinity. Now, who is Ryan King? Ryan is the CEO and founder of Guardian Payments, a credit card processing company which has been so successful that he's semi-retired at age 38. He's a devoted husband of nearly 14 years and a father to 11 and 13-year-old boys. Now, since his first son was born, this was 13 years ago, he kept an Evernote folder with life lessons about what it means to be a man. He started doing this because when he entered manhood, he felt so ill-equipped as a boy stepping into manhood that he had no manual, he had no guidance. And he wanted his sons to have a manual from him for what healthy, responsible manhood could look like. So he started taking these 13 years of journal entries and created these long-form posts on Instagram, which is ultimately what caught my attention and how he and I forged our relationship. So in this episode, we're diving deep into 3 of Ryan's most popular posts on masculinity. And here he is reading the first, "Being a Man of Your Word."
One of the few upsides of how far our society has fallen is that it's easier than ever to separate yourself from the crowd. At this point, just doing what you say you're going to do makes you stand out. In business, with women, and life, if you just follow through, you'll be ahead of the majority of your peers. The bar is low. This should go without saying, but when a man says he's going to do something, he does it. This is entry-level manhood. If you want to be respected as a man, people should know that when you give your word, it's as good as done. No need to babysit you, no need to hold your hand. If you say, "I got it," that means the other person should never have to wonder about it again. Your name should be synonymous with the word dependable. It's become popular to have a mentality of it being tough, to not care what anyone thinks. Well, I hate to break it to you, but what other people think matters if you want to get anything done in the world. Having a great reputation is one of the most consistently bankable assets on the planet.
Yeah, there's so much power and potency in these words, Ryan. And, I'm going to go back and where you say that this should go without saying, but when a man says he's going to do something, he does it. This is entry-level manhood. If you want to be respected as a man, people should know that when you give your word, it's as good as done. No need to babysit you. No need to hold your hand. As a leader of men's communities, right? I run 3 masterminds and I've been in men's group and I've been around men's work for years. It is shocking how rare this quality is. You get someone who, signs up for a mastermind and then they hem and they haw. They don't show up. You don't know if a guy's going to be there on time or not, or if they're going to come to the meeting or not. They say they're going to do something. And then it's 50-50. And immediately, you can't tell whether or not this person's for real. But it seems to be acceptable. Otherwise, there'd be a lot more guys who are following through on their word. It seems like the standard has gotten kind of low where that behavior is tolerated. And where do you think that comes from?
I think almost every major societal issue comes from the same place. It's lack of male leadership. I don't really know what else could cause that. For me, I never intended to even write about that. That particular post was written in response to other things that I wrote. And I had so many, especially mainly women, just randomly asking me, because I'd written other posts on some relationship stuff. I don't even know how many DMs I got with women asking me, like, what should I do about a man that says he's going to do something and doesn't do it? And for me, it was a weird situation for me to be in, because I don't even have an answer for that. Like, he's not a man. That's my first reaction when I hear that, is that he's not a man.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't even see how. That's why I was kind of snarky in that particular post with that line of, this is entry-level manhood. Then most of the stuff that I write, I try to build bridges for most of the stuff that I write and not divide people and be opinionated. I'm trying to write things in a way that, regardless of if you're on the right or if you're on the left, or if you're hyper masculine or maybe you're not very masculine, I try to write things in a way that brings all those different people together. And one of the lines that that's really impacted me in my life a lot is the essence of influence is agreement. And so for me, I try to write things that everybody can agree with. And that's why I use the story format that I do and the long form format that I do, because I'm tackling some topics that a lot of times would cause division and would cause hate and trolling and, all that stuff. And I feel like the only way that I can properly talk about those things, that by the end, everybody is in agreement with the conclusion that I come to, is this long form, format, where you take this topic that, may be divisive or may be controversial or may trigger some people. And if they read through it to the end, they see, okay, he's addressed, all the different extremes and all the different things that people might disagree with. And so, but yeah, as far as a man keeping his word, I don't really know. To me, it is entry level manhood. And not everybody's perfect about it, man. I don't want to sit and pretend like I always follow through and I don't have things fall through the cracks or I don't forget, but I think the distinction is, when I do those things, there's a trigger for me where my conscience tells me I failed in some way. And I need to make amends for that. I need to apologize. I need to go above and beyond to fix that error. Accepting it is definitely not okay.
Yeah, I think about, my earliest role model around obviously masculinity with my father, and I know not everyone grows up with a father, but my dad was there. He was present. And when you talk about a man of your word, my dad is the embodiment of that. He worked the same job for 47 years at a bond trading company down near on Wall Street called Ramirez and Company. He was on the train every single day, same time, early in the morning, getting, to and from work. And then anytime, I had a baseball game, he would come home from the city early and he would come and coach it, or he would come, like for practice or watch the games. He was always there. And then even later in life, when I would come home from college and I would need to borrow the car would be ready and he would have the gas tank filled up. Like if he said it was done, it was done. And what was really interesting about that for me, Ryan, was it didn't even feel like this big thing. It was just like, it was so obvious that that's how I had to be too.
And maybe that is why it's not common anymore, is because we almost took it for granted. We assumed that everybody just knew it. And maybe that's a big reason why we've lost it, is just, it seems like the most common sense thing to do it. And even for me, like I never expected to write about that. It wasn't until I realized it was a problem with other men not doing it that I felt the need to write about it, because I took it for granted that it even needed to be written about. As I was writing that post, what's so funny is I expect that post to go nowhere. I figured the response would just be, dude, everybody knows that. Like, duh, And some of my biggest posts have been ones that I had that kind of hesitation to even write or post, because I felt like people would be like, man, this is like basic stuff that nobody is going to be interested in. Like, we want advanced, really deep stuff, And when I write about the really simple stuff, I've been shocked at the response to how many people have been like, yes, this is what's needed, So to me, if I had to guess, why we've lost that, I think the men that embodied that took for granted that they needed to emphasize that, their voice, because it's such a basic thing that you almost think you don't even need to talk about it. Like, it's just obvious, when apparently it's not.
That's well said. I'll bring in some of the context with women here too, because I know that you write, a lot of relationship stuff and you have a lot of women who even asked you to write this post. I did a post recently where I kind of did this. Here's what a man who's losing credibility sounds like. Here's what a man who's gaining credibility sounds like. And, one of the examples I gave was a man losing credibility sounds like, honey, of course I want to spend time with you, but you have no idea how busy work is right now. And using that as a chronic excuse, a one-off time, like everyone gets busy somewhere, but there's that chronic excuse of like, and then a guy, gaining credibility sounds like, things are really busy right now and you're my priority, so I'll make the time. And this is another example of you being a man of your word, because when you're in a relationship, you have made a commitment to that other human being that you are going to be tending to that soil. And I'd love to get your perspective on this too, because I know you are a devoted husband. And I see a lot of guys who they believe in this bullshit story that relationship is supposed to be easy, and that, you know, when they come home with an empty tank, that they should be able to flop around and not have anything left for their, you know, for their partner. And the way that I see that is like, that is a mismanagement of your resources. If you can't come home with something in the tank for your, you know, your family. And I know that most people probably don't want to hear from a guy who doesn't have one just of his own just yet, because I don't know what that situation is like, but I plan on managing my resources because my queen deserves it and my kids will deserve it. So I'm just curious, like what your perspective is on what you've seen from men either not showing up in their word regarding a relationship and what the downstream effects of that is.
Well, it's just manhood as a concept is far more sick. And what I mean, not like in like a perverted sense, I mean like in illness, than I realized when I started writing. Because I'd never been exposed to like the red pill content, and you know, I wasn't a consumer of social media. I mean, I had Twitter and I would follow some sports stuff, you know, and things like that. But I had no idea the stuff people were saying about relationships. And it's just been kind of mind blowing to me. You know, one of the things that I've noticed is, you know, men are fascinated with this idea of like becoming a king, you know, good for you, king. That's king energy and, you know, things like that. And it's like, well, what kind of a king do you want to be? Do you want to be a good king or a bad king? You know, a good king is defined by duty and responsibility. A bad king uses his kingship to satisfy his own desires and his own instincts and his own ego. You know, a good king sacrifices and puts his needs last in service to the people he's responsible for. You know, and some women get offended, you know, when you say, you know, I'm responsible for her. To me, it's just a helpful word, and it's a helpful mindset for a man to have to serve his wife the right way. You know, it's not that she can't be responsible for herself. I think men just need to view it as a responsibility because it helps activate the part of them that behaves the way she wants and the way she needs. I wish I could say that where women didn't hear that so that they don't think, oh, I don't need to be somebody to be responsible for me. It's like, no, it has nothing to do with your ability at all. It has to do with activating the mind of a man in the appropriate way to realize like you are responsible for taking care of your kingdom. She is part of your kingdom. If you want to be a king, she's your queen. She's the most important thing, you know. And I even wrote about that, I think, in one of the posts that you wanted to talk about was, you know, I would die for her, but do I live for her? You know, it's part of the nature of being a man to want to die for his wife, you know, to be a hero. My 11-year-old son confided in me recently that he's daydreamed already about dying heroically for his wife and children. As men, we tend to prioritize big romantic gestures, rescuing her from a burning building, defending her honor in a street fight. As honorable as that may be, it's also pretty unlikely. Dying in a blaze of glory is easy. Dying to myself and sacrificing for her on a daily basis is much more difficult. What do I mean by dying to myself? Prioritizing her needs above my own, taking the time to listen to her. This one addresses one of the things you mentioned earlier, is digging deep to give her my best self, even when I'm exhausted and have nothing left. Yeah. Validating her feelings, even when I think she's being silly. You know, validating her feelings is different than, and I think I wrote this in a different post, but that's different than agreeing with her.
Sure.
You know, that's an important distinction. Being there consistently, making sure she knows I'll be there to catch her if she falls. And to me, that falls into being a man of your word, you know, being steady and unfailing, taking charge in moments of chaos, meeting her needs without her having to ask multiple times, which is a big one. And then loving her relentlessly, even when I don't feel like it, even when she doesn't deserve it.
What's a moment where she doesn't deserve it?
I don't know that anyone in particular jumps out. I think it's just the distinction between a choice and being reactive. You know, as a man, I think that's when you talk about one of the qualities of manhood, it's control, self-control. Anybody can be a good husband and be loving and steady and calm when she's behaving, you know, in a way that makes it easy to, be steady and calm. It's what choice are you going to make? Are you going to be reacting to her, or are you going to make a choice to be steady and to be calm and to be, relentless in the way you conduct yourself to a higher standard, even when she may not deserve it, even when she hasn't been loving lately, or when she hasn't been nurturing lately, or when she hasn't been understanding of the fact that you've been tired? Are you going to lash out because you're tired? Like if she needs attention, if she needs nourishing, if she's stressed out, or if she's anxious, or if she's had a crazy day, she may lash out, and she may not be nurturing, and she may not say things in a loving way. She may blame me, and she may, talk down to me or be condescending or whatever. And in those moments, maybe she doesn't deserve for me to be loving, but I choose to love her relentlessly, even especially. And those are the moments that the rubber really meets the fucking road, man. Anybody can be a good husband and be, and be all these things we aspire to be when it's easy. To me, the measure of the man and the measure of your worth as a husband and the kingship and all those things is how do you behave in those moments of adversity? And your relationship is going to have adversity. And the way I've found to go about handling those things the right way is to focus on what I choose to be and what character traits I choose to embody. It has nothing to do with her. I'm not reacting to her. I'm not doing it to manipulate anything out of her. I'm not doing it for any other reason than this is who I've chosen to be. And I don't really give a damn. I'm going to be it because I have to answer to myself.
Yeah. What you're talking about is the essence of masculine leadership, which is stability and groundedness. So if we think about in nature, like mountains are so masculine because they're just rooted, they're grounded, they've been there, they've weathered storms. And what you're talking about is in those moments where maybe she is tirade or maybe she's being condescending. And we all walk through these different parts of it. We all embody these. But in those moments, are you going to let her blow your mountain away? Or is your mountain firmly rooted in the ground? And David Deida talks a lot about this in The Way of the Superior Man. If she can push you around, then she can't trust you.
Yes.
And oftentimes she will test unconsciously just to see, is she safe?
Yep. If she can push you around,
then the world can push you around. Exactly. And
one of the other lines from that same post talking about being a mountain, it says, you're the strong, steady presence in her life, the rock the world breaks itself against, her shelter and safe harbor in the storm.
Bingo. And that goes for everything, right? That goes for, you can't become untethered for her praise, right? Because we can oftentimes become addicted to the praise or the sex and then leave our groundedness. And then then we end up floating around, or we can be pushed around by the storm. So I like that. I really like that. And one of the most important things I don't want to gloss over from this post, this point that you hit about, yes, of course, I'd love to die for my wife as a hero and a blaze of glory. And I tend to prioritize these grand gestures, and a lot of guys do, but it's how do I show up on the day-to-day stuff, which is really where she feels, are you in the foxhole with me? Are we on the same team? Do you see me?
Are you going to be the hero you want to be, or are you going to be the hero that she needs?
Very different.
Because, at the end of the day, other people are the ones that call us heroes. We don't call ourselves heroes. That's weird, right? And so if you ask a woman what she finds heroic is maybe you come home from work and you're exhausted and everything's chaos in the house. The house is a mess. The kids are running around. She's trying to cook and she's got all this stuff going on. And you can just tell that right now she needs a breath of fresh air. She needs a break. And just coming in and saying, hey, I got this. You go take a shower, or you go listen to some music, go for a walk. I'll finish dinner. I'll watch the kids. Dude, that's a hell of a lot easier than dying in a house fire. Right? It's amazing. I wish men could see the DMs that I get. And even with my own wife, like on just little lines like that, like women don't have these insane expectations, just little things like that. Like just noticing that she's fragile and noticing that she's anxious and taking control in those moments of chaos. If she's in chaos, I wouldn't say all moments of chaos. There's a lot of chaotic situations my wife handles just fine.
Sure.
But if she's in chaos and having the groundedness to be aware of when she's in need and stepping in and saying, hey, I got you. You don't have to handle all this on your own. I got you. Like those are little daily ways that I don't feel like cooking dinner and managing the kids. I want to go sit on the couch and watch TV, but even in real life marriage, I can tell you, me just doing that for an hour gets me a week of like no guilt. I can come home from work and put my feet up and watch TV because she's so grateful, she's so appreciative. But yeah, like I said, I mean, those moments, it's so much easier to do that than to die in a house fire. And I think if we can just shift men's perspectives to say, hey, do you have that heroic instinct? Like I said, my 11-year-old son already daydreams about like, God, I hope somebody breaks in the house and tries to hurt my family because I just want to kill them. Like there's a reason men are drawn to those stories. If we can just reframe that mindset from like, dude, it might not be exciting and it might not be sexy to like do the dishes for her one night out of a year, but that's a way, in a real way, that you can be her hero.
Larry Hagner, who runs the Dad Edge community, and it's, community of fathers, he came on this podcast a little while ago and he talked about a micro heroic moment. And I kind of like that name, these micro heroic moments where, his wife is, I think they have 3 boys together, maybe 4 boys. So she's in a household where there's always at least 4 or 5 masculine energies needing something from her, right? And of course, Larry, who loves his wife and he's sexually attracted to his wife, there were times in the past where like, he would pursue more than she had energy for. And he learned that about her, right? He learned to attune his awareness. And he goes, I remember seeing her at the end of a week, she had a lot on her shoulders and she was washing dishes in the kitchen sink. And I could tell she was tired. And I walked up to her from behind and put my arms around her belly to hug her. And I could feel her whole body tense up, right? Like here's another, he wants something from me moment. And he just leaned into her ear and he whispered, baby, I don't need anything from you right now. I just want to tell you how amazing you were this week and how much I love you. And why don't you stop? I'm going to take the rest of the dishes from here. That's it. Those micro moments are like, boom. That's the grand gesture that takes a little bit of awareness and 5 minutes of getting your hands dirty in the sink that builds the trust.
Yeah, it's so easy to do those things. I just think we need to normalize it. I just don't think men are talking about it enough. I think women say it, but, young single men aren't really listening to what women have to say. They probably should.
No doubt.
But the reality is they just tend to tune women out about a lot of those things. And until men start stepping up and saying, hey, bro, this is what works, figure out how to play that mind game with yourself. Just think of it as being her hero that you already want to be. Just reframe it.
Yeah.
In very small ways. It doesn't take these big gestures.
I'll tell you what, man, like if a guy wants to go through a school of what do women want, and if they don't want to pay a cent for it, just come to your Instagram page, come to my Instagram page, read the comments from the women.
Yeah.
They're publicly available. They will tell you all day long exactly what it is they're looking for, what they're cheering for, what they validate, what they don't. And it's all right there. It's readily available. And like you said, guys just aren't looking, like they're looking at Instagram models who will never show them the time of day instead of like read through these comments that are here.
What's funny is that the podcast I just got off of before I got on with you was with an Instagram model.
Okay.
And she was saying all the same things. So it even applies to, the Instagram models. It's basic arithmetic, man. It's not calculus. It really is that simple, and men try to make it harder than it has to be. And dating is a whole different ballgame. Men ask me dating questions. I'm like, bro, I have no idea. It's been 20 years since I was in that world. How to pursue a woman and get her attention and date her. I have no idea. The stuff I'm talking about is after all that, once she's made that commitment, and I go out of my way. And the post that I read, about dying is the last in a series. There was a 5-part series about, how to love her well.
Yeah.
But that's in the context of after you're married, and she's not even necessarily married, but after she's made that commitment. If you act like this on third date, you're going to be a weirdo. like.
Yeah. But like, as a guy who's in the dating realm right now, what I can tell you is these same rules apply in the sense of, and this is a simple one, when you're going out on a date with somebody, you propose, here's where I think what might be nice to go. And here's the time. I'm going to pick you up then, or I'm going to meet you there then. Are we good? Does that sound good? And usually, like, cause I'm attracting fairly feminine women who like to be led. Not every woman wants to be led, right? There are a lot of women who have much more masculine essence, and that's a whole other different conversation. But for the women I know that I want to date, that I'm magnetized to, they're feminine in essence. So they love a guy who leads. And then these simple concepts of the day before, just letting them know, hey, like, I'm really looking forward to seeing you. I'll be there at this time, because they've been ghosted before. There's always that. So just those little things of being a man of your word.
Yeah, they just continue to demonstrate your stability and your steadiness and your communication and taking charge and being proactive and not reactive. I mean, just really basic stuff, man. It really is.
Yeah, it's entry level shit. Well, why don't we make sure we cover this last one that I think feels really good, because it's also on brand. You're posting around great men care deeply. And we have communities of great men around here.
Yeah. The first thing I can recall learning is the duty of a man is that you're the one that gets to die if the situation calls for it. The captain goes down with the ship. The women and children get the lifeboats. I feel like this is something all honorable men know. It's a code that we live by. You don't lay down your life, the most precious thing you have, lightly. You're not willing to do that unless you care deeply about others. In reading back through history, I've noticed that it was never considered masculine to be complacent, not until Hollywood. Modern men now think it's cool to pretend like we don't care, to constantly make inane jokes instead of speaking articulately and meaningfully. Men feel the need to either not express themselves or joke around. We can care, we just can't let other people know that we care. As a society, we admire men who care about something larger than themselves, who have found something worth throwing themselves into heart and soul. Don't be misled by Hollywood bullshit. Don't fall for the psyop of mindless entertainment. These are addictive distractions to keep you outraged, indifferent, comfortable, and complacent. Our minds have been castrated by an IV drip of empty dopamine hits.
Our minds have been castrated by an IV drip of empty dopamine hits. What inspired you to write this, Ryan?
I'm just tired. It just seems like as a man, there's this stupid modern thing where if you act like you care, then other dudes start giving you shit because it's like, oh, it's not manly to care. No homo, all this stupid shit, and it's like, dude, there's at no point in history has it been masculine to not care and to prioritize like being cool. There's this flippancy with men. It's like, you get 5 guys together. If you start having a deep conversation about anything that really, whether it's, talking about relationships or anything like we're talking about right now, if this wasn't a podcast and it was you and me and 3 other dudes in a bar, what are the odds that at this point in the conversation, one of the dumbass dudes would have just made a flippant comment and made a joke because they're not comfortable talking about anything real?
But it happened 45 minutes ago.
99%. Yeah. 99%. It's like they'd rather just talk about nonsense because they're so uncomfortable expressing anything real that matters, that they care about, whether it's loving their wife. There's like this thing with a lot of men. I don't know what it's like for you. You're around other men than I am, especially with like your mastermind groups and stuff. But if you just randomly walk into a bar and start hanging out with dudes, if you start talking good about your wife, they look at you like you're gay, like they've lost respect for you or something, And it's like, there's this pressure to just talk shit about your wife. I'm not going to talk shit about my wife. Like, no, I don't feel that way about her. And I'm not going to pretend to just to fit in with you, And so that to me is just all the things, not just about my wife. If you passionately care about anything, if you're around most men, they're going to change the subject to something just stupid and inane. And they'll just make some lighthearted joke to change the subject because they don't want to talk about it.
Unless it's about business or something that, like guys have determined that it's cool to care about. And what you talked about with your wife, I spent 15 years in financial services where, I ended up at a lot of social sales events where guys would be complaining about their wives, and there'd be a complaint about nagging or a complaint about that, they were the only breadwinner and there was never enough, and complaints about not getting enough sex. And it was just like the running commentary was always a complaint. And it was one of the reasons why I never really wanted to get married, because like listening to all these examples. And it was when I left that and then, started doing work in this men's space where I'm swimming in seas of guys who love their partners, whether it's wives or same-sex marriages or relationships, like they are in love with their partner and they brag about their partner. And even when shit goes bad with their partner, they don't speak shit about their partner behind their partner's back. They speak about them with integrity. And yeah, they'll talk about, hey, things are hard right now. They're difficult, but always with the utmost respect. And it was only when that was modeled that I start to realize, oh, there are guys out here who really love the person that they're in relationship with.
And here's the deal. Those are the men other men really respect. They can talk all the shit they want to, but they're just trying to be cool. One thing that came to mind, I had somebody point this out to me yesterday that I thought was really profound. I know not everybody listening to this is a Christian, and I don't promote a lot of Christian stuff, but just I thought it was really interesting where in Genesis, after Eve eats the apple, right, God comes to Adam and said, "What did you do?" And he basically blamed her. He pointed the finger and said, "Oh, it was her fault." And is that not the most typical man not taking responsibility? This goes back to ancient mythology. Whether you believe the Bible is true or not, it's still, if it's not true, it's at least qualifies as mythology, as worth being something that informs, our culture, like those things have an impact. And I just thought that was really interesting. And to me, that's the most unmasculine thing you can do. If you consider yourself masculine, what's intertwined with that for me is leadership and taking responsibility. And so if your wife is nagging you, if you're not getting enough sex, if she's spending too much money, guess whose fault that is? Yours. If you want to be the leader, then that means that those things are a failure in your leadership.
Right. And your ability to communicate.
Don't blame her.
Right. The ability to communicate, to resolve, to work on that. If it's happening and you're complaining about it.
Like, don't sit here and act like you're a victim. Like, you're her husband. If you don't like certain behavior, then communicate with her. Figure out how to resolve it. And it's the same thing that God asked Adam. Like, why did you let her eat the apple? Oh, she did it. It wasn't my fault. And I'm sure there's plenty of other examples in other religions, and other mythologies, and other patterns. I just think that was an interesting insight. It's a completely common thread, even all the way to the modern day, of when something goes wrong, instead of wearing it like a man and saying, "Yep, it's on me." And here's the thing: we know that that's not okay. Like when an NFL quarterback, after a game, they lose the game. What do we think about the quarterback that says, "Oh, it was the wide receiver's fault, or it was the referee's fault"?
You lose immediate respect.
Right? They would get destroyed. Any man that we hold up as like a model of manhood, if they ever point the finger at somebody else, even if they're right, we all collectively lose respect for that man. Period.
Yeah. And Ryan, what you said earlier about the men that other men really respect are the ones who talk well about their partners, right? But what's interesting about that is even though most men will respect those guys, they won't know how to be around those guys because they themselves are not yet that guy. They're more comfortable being around the other guys where you can talk shit and you can drop your standard. And so what that often means is
isolation.
Right. The guy who actually steps up and speaks well is not related to and can find himself in this. So oftentimes it takes courage, and it's kind of like venturing out into the woods, not knowing where the next meal is going to come from, but having confidence that like you'll find it.
That's masculine.
Right.
I mean, that's masculine. Because here's the thing, and I've found this in my life. I've dealt with the isolation because I've been that guy. When other men talk bad about their wives, I talk good about mine. And if that means that they walk away, then they walk away. But guess what? They come up to me later.
Right.
They'll message me privately and say, "Man, can we have lunch?" And I may not have the breadth of friendships and relationships, but the deep friendships come from those situations where that might be just one guy that heard that and said, "You know what? I don't feel comfortable being that in public, but that's what I really want." And they'll come to you and they'll ask you to go to lunch, and you'll build real meaningful relationships then, because those relationships of bullshitting around, they're meaningless anyway. Those men don't have it. If shit really went down, the men that have stood around talking shit about their wives aren't there for each other because you can't be real with
exactly. They don't know how to hold any real emotional any really emotionally heavy situation. They may be there to kind of like stand alongside you, go out, get drunk with you, but they're not going to be the ones helping you break through the mud.
Yeah. And that's the sad thing, is the dynamic that I've found in my relationship is that, when I've gone through hard times, if I'm struggling, it's impossible for my wife. My wife is there for me and she's supportive and she does what she can do and she does a good job of it, but it really affects her because if you use the imagery of like a tree, the wind starts blowing hard and I start shaking, she can't help but shake. And the sad thing is there are times where men don't have it figured out, where they don't know what to do. And your spouse really, usually in most cases, is not the best person for the man to lean on in these situations, not because she can't handle it, but because of the effect it has on her. It makes her feel unstable. Sure. So having another man to lean on that's a rock is a lot of times what we need. And I think men are suffering because they don't have any men that they have that kind of relationship with where they could admit, like, man, I'm struggling. I think that's why, the suicide rate is 4 times higher for men because, if a woman's struggling with suicidal thoughts, she's got friends she can probably talk to, whereas men don't. I mean, every man that I know that's committed suicide, like nobody had any idea it was coming. They were walking around with the mask on, and so many of the men around them have been like, bro, if I would have known, I would have dropped everything to be there for you.
Yeah. And so those are tragic moments. Speaking about the women, the burden that they're under to shoulder all of their man's emotional responsibility. It's exhausting for them. It's depolarizing for them. You and I hear it all the time in our messages where women are like, I love him. I want to know what's going on in his inner world, but he's got no one else he processes this with. And now he's not taking ownership. It's now in my basket that I have to deal with that dirty laundry. And she starts to resent him a little bit by bit. So anyway, I think to kind of wrap this, what the conversation that we've had today boils down to is a great man cares. He takes responsibility for his relationships and his commitment. He's a man of his word. I think these 3 posts that you put together are beautiful, and you've got a whole bunch of others on the Wisdom of Kings, which is your handle on Instagram. And I'm going to link that at the show notes, top of show notes with those 3 posts as well.
Awesome.
Man, are there any final words you would want to leave our audience with, whether it's what's the next post that you're cooking up or anything that you think men need to hear?
Yeah, I think, especially given like what we talked about at the beginning, with what's going on in the world, I think tying into that theme of kingship is take responsibility. We need men to take responsibility, not just for themselves, not just for their families, but to take on as much responsibility as they can handle. Because we can all sit around complaining and worrying about what's going on in the world, but we've got to do something about it, and that starts with more than just politics and policy and all that. That starts with, we need men stepping up and taking on as much responsibility as they can deal with and healing themselves and, finding other men that make them better and having good relationships, but also taking it a step further and being a father to the fatherless, coaching a baseball team and go to the boys club and volunteer to coach a basketball team. Like, take on as much responsibility as you can possibly handle. If you're tired of what you see going on in the world, the only thing that can change that is us. So that would be the thing that I'm really trying the most to do with men, is to take it a step further than just become a man and keep your word. Like, let's get these basics done and knocked out because the world needs us. There's nobody coming to save us. We've got to step up and take responsibility for everything we can possibly find if we want anything to get better. It's time to stop whining and complaining and do something.
Hey, Brian and I wanted to thank you for the ratings and reviews that you leave us. We read every single one of them, and they're so helpful in helping us to understand what resonates with you and helps us to determine which topics that we use in the future. So if you found this episode to be of particular value to you, will you please leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts so that we know that this is the kind of topic you want to hear more about? And it also helps other prospective listeners to figure out where they can dive in first. Thank you.